For some of us, it's been a long day. We had our advisory committee. We went to go see our new battery lab, but really thrilled to see how many people are turning out for this. I've actually never run a meeting where we had to close registration. We have over 400 people registered for tomorrow. My advice is get here early. And with that in mind, I don't know where Jamie is hiding, our communications director, who set all this up. He's on the agenda tomorrow, so you'll get to hear him. We really think we've pulled together a very powerful symposium that starts tonight. But I want to just talk briefly about what we're going to run a show tomorrow. And by the way, just doing your food. And when Larry's talking, you can eat, but don't make noise. So 8 o'clock, we will start with breakfast. And I will do a short kickoff where we'll introduce, for those of you who haven't been involved with the Electric Vehicle Center, we're actually celebrating now. We passed our 2nd-year anniversary. I'll be able to tell you what we've been doing. And at that point, I get to be a participant in the audience. I'll be turning it over to Solomon Adira, who is our symposium chair and pulled this program together. And our first speaker is going to be the State Chief Mobility Officer, Justine Johnson, which will be really insightful. My preview I saw of the slides, she'll be talking about the state's Mobility 1.0 initiative and begin to introduce the new Mobility 2.0. We'll then have a chance to see the results of our 2 first technology projects. And I'm really looking forward to the part that I had no ability to influence. We're having a power panel. It's led by, if you know, Pete Bigelow from the media, and John McElroy, many of you know from Autoline Detroit, Brent Gruber, and Terry Wachowski, who's really going to together challenge us on, particularly in today's environment, what's it going to take for us to continue our leadership in electric vehicles? Then we're actually going to be introducing what we've now termed at the University of Mobility at Michigan. Then at lunch. Tomorrow, if you did not take advantage today of the tour of the Wilson Center, where our student teams operate, and it was really intriguing to see almost all of our student teams involved with vehicles are there, except for one, they've all gone electric now, even an electric boat. So it's really worth it if you can get to the Wilson Center. And we'll also be having a tour of our Materials Characterization Center. And that'll occur during lunch. Then we'll be announcing our winners of the student posters presentations. If you didn't get to them today, they'll be here tonight. They'll be here in the morning. Then Denise Graves. Then we have Bob Lee from LG. I've heard him give this talk before. It's really phenomenal. And we'll finish up. I wanted to make sure the faculty stayed till the end. We're going to be announcing a new $1 million proposal fund. So with that as background, let's talk about tonight. I have the pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Larry Burns. Many of you know, Larry hired me in GM, and I still remember certain parts of my interview. You can imagine I'm at Ford Motor Company, so it all had to be done very carefully. And we actually, after the first meeting, moved the interviews to his house. And I remember, he let me in his office and had to go take a call. And there's 2 rows of joke books. And I'm thinking, what is this? Well, if you ever heard Larry talk, there's always some great jokes in there. But Larry was the Corporate Vice President of Research and Development and Planning at GM for 11 years, from 2008 to 2009. And I think what you're going to get a flavor for, and what I've always admired about him, was the ability to see what the future could look like, pulling together the dots. And if you look at where we are today in the transformation of the industry, connected, autonomous, and electric, he wrote that script before I even joined in 2001. And along with that, if you haven't gone, he's done 2 books, The Quest for the Driverless Car, and Reinventing the Automobile and Autonomy. But I got to see the real plan for how General Motors was going to play through this transition. After retiring from GM, he worked with Waymo, worked with Columbia University, a major project on a self-sustaining economy in Florida. He's a member of the National Academy, has given over 500 keynote addresses. And I always call in a favor. Once a year, he comes and lectures to my capstone class. Thought leader, and someone who really does future thinking, but with realism. And in this case, a script he wrote 25 years ago is really being implemented today. So with that, I want to introduce Larry. The other thing is, it's supposed to rain tomorrow. Make sure on your way out, if you haven't gotten it, pick up your electric vehicle center umbrella.
Thank you very much, Alan. That was a really great introduction. You know, we connect emotionally to cars and trucks. Prince obviously sang Little Red Corvette. The Eagles sang about flatbed Fords, and Aretha Franklin sings about pink Cadillacs. To my knowledge, no one sings Little Red Laptop Computer or pink iPhones. And you know what happens if you play a country song backwards? The guy gets his dog back, his girl back, and his truck back. So there is something really special here. To set the stage for my comments tonight, I want to tell a story about a physician, a physicist, and a politician were debating whose profession was the oldest. And the physician said, well, when life was created, that was a medical miracle, so a doctor had to be there. And the physicist said, yeah, but before that could have occurred, order had to evolve from all of the chaos in the universe, so physicists had to be there. And the politician said, who do you think created all the chaos? And I think electric vehicles really, let me get these going now. Electric vehicles have really gotten themselves on a chaotic roller coaster. We're experiencing extreme highs and extreme lows, success followed by failure, and some real excitement and some disappointment. Today's EVs in China are soaring up like the sky's the limit, and the EVs here in the US and Europe seem to be going down with no bottom in sight. I would contend we've attained a now what moment for electric vehicles. And I've had a lot of these now what moments in my life, I'm sure you have too. And I've learned to kind of accept them. They happen. I've also learned that there's oftentimes real opportunity in these moments that we have to take advantage of. So tonight what I'm going to do is frame one of those opportunities. I'm going to talk about the future of living and the future of electric vehicles in the context of the future of access, how we access the things that we want to do. Now, I'm sure some of you are going to be skeptical about what I say, and that's okay. But I believe what I'm going to share with you is inevitable, and I suggest that you consider it as you ponder the future going forward. John Lennon told us that life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. In essence, what he's saying is, living is what we do. We do things like work and shop and learn and eat. We take care of ourselves. We meet, we socialize, we play, we entertain. We take vacations. We do our personal finances. These are the things we do. These activities use our time. They take place at different locations, and they occur at various times. And because of that, we have to access them. And we can do that physically with transportation, or we can do that virtually with communication. Now, if you go back over 100 years ago, some inventions came along, like the telephone, the phonograph, the radio, the television, the car, and the airplane. And these were widely adopted in 1995 to 1975. I was born in the middle of this period. And these inventions really shaped my coming of age. They allowed me to access my friends. They allowed me to listen to the Stones and the Doors and ZZ Top. They allowed me to watch the Lions lose yet another football game on TV. Let me go out on dates, travel to school, and travel to work. The one technology here that was really, truly profound was the automobile. And it really became dominant as the way for Americans to move around in that time frame. And that's because of the physical access that automobiles provide. It's not any one trip that makes your car really valuable. It's the freedom to go where you want to go, when you want to go. And that freedom is just fundamental to why we spend a lot of money to buy a new car and then leave it parked 95% of the time. Now, my first car was a 1969 Volkswagen Beetle. I bought it new for $1,400, and then I put hippie flowers on it and racing stripes. I was really fickle as a teenager back then. Then in 1975, I bought a Chevy van. I was heading out to University of California, Berkeley for graduate school, and I customized that van so I could camp in it and live on the road. And it gave me enormous freedom to visit parks and mountains and forests and go to places I had never been before. And I loved this van. I really did. I probably spent 70 nights a year in it for 3 years. But while it was perfect for camping, it was far from ideal for getting around in the San Francisco Bay Area. And that's the fundamental problem with our cars and trucks. Americans buy autos for extreme, occasional trips. If you look at this chart in particular, 99% of cars have 4 to 8 seats, but 80% of our trips have 1 or 2 people. Top speeds of our cars are over 100 miles an hour, but if you look at average door-to-door travel time, you're going at about 30. Our cars have ranges over 400 miles, but most of our trips each day are less than 25 miles. And we can carry up to 3,000 pounds, but usually 2 of us with 2 bags weigh 500 pounds or less. In that last line, 8,760 hours a year availability, and we use it 450 hours. This is really stupefying. And to help you understand why I picked that word, if you take 275 million automobiles in the United States, parked 95% of the time, with 5 seats on average and 1.5 occupant per trip when they are being used, that's 1.4 billion seats empty 98.5% of the time. That is the same as 12,600 University of Michigan football stadiums sitting empty. Think about being in the seat business for automobiles. They're pretty complicated, safety critical systems, and you're making these seats and they add value just 1.5% of the time of their existence. And they're oftentimes nicer than the seats you have in your living room. 6-way adjustment, lumbar massage, heating and cooling. But that's where our industry has landed. And the trend is really quite troubling. Since 1982, data has been collected by NHTSA on automobiles. And our cars are 40% heavier, 175% more powerful, 55% faster, and 25% more costly. So all of that great engineering and technology, lightweighting, all of these materials, all this great work on combustion, cleaner fuels, has, by the marketing side of our industry, been translated into bigger and much more powerful machines. This comparison of a 1993 Chevrolet Silverado 2500 to its counterpart in 2023, I think makes the point pretty clear. The 2023 is 2,200 pounds heavier and blatantly larger. And you have to ask yourself, how are those 2023 pickup trucks being used differently than the 1993 pickup? The implications here are that larger, heavier, more powerful, faster, longer range vehicles are making our roads less safe for others. In 2024, over 44,000 people died on US roadways. That's up 26% since 2014. A lot of people try to explain this away with driver distraction. I think it's the increase in kinetic energy that we see from all this extra mass and all this extra power. And in 2024, new car prices averaged $48,000. That's 60% of household median income. And back in 1990, that percent was 42%. So cars have become much more costly. Now, these trends have made things pretty challenging for electric vehicles, especially those aiming to match their gasoline vehicle counterparts. The Silverado is 2,200 pounds lighter than the Silverado EV. This means that if you take your Silverado EV and you go to the store to buy a gallon of milk, you're taking the entire line of the offense of Detroit Lions with you. How many think that's a solution to climate change? So I think we've got ourselves a challenge here. So what should we do instead? Yogi Berra, a famous baseball player, said it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. And I happen to agree with that. But tonight I'm going to share my perspective on this future and how we get out of the trap that we're in, where we would love to pivot to wide usage of electric vehicles. We've got a great center here to help us do that. But certainly the idea of shoehorning batteries into cars as we've always known them is creating a big challenge for us. So up until 2010, almost every car on the road had mechanical drive, combustion engine, oil-based fuel, and human controls. And Alan mentioned my book, Autonomy. In that book, I lay out this new DNA for automobiles, connected, electric, and autonomous. I can't get into the details tonight. I like to call this automobility. And automobility really promises compelling physical access, better experiences at lower cost with profound societal benefits. That's really what this is all about. And Einstein has taught us that the best design is the simplest one that works. And really mature autonomous electric connected vehicles will likely have half as many parts as today's cars and trucks, and even fewer moving parts. And their skateboard platforms and software architectures make it a lot easier to differentiate vehicles. And differentiation is really important to the auto industry. In 1925, the president of General Motors, Alfred Sloan, differentiated GM from Chevrolet up to Cadillac with a car for every purse and purpose. But what's happened in the next 100 years is that has evolved into an SUV or pickup for rich purses and all purposes. And the opportunity I want to talk about tonight is a vehicle for every trip, purse, and purpose. When you see an opportunity, you got to go for it. You really do. Last week, weather was quite nice. I live in Franklin Village in Michigan. My wife and I were out on our deck having a glass of wine, and suddenly she goes, "Oh, I love you, I love you." And I'm thinking, now, here's an opportunity. And I said, "Is that you talking or the wine talking?" And she said, "It's me talking to the wine." So you don't know what you're going to get. The point I'm trying to make here is the fundamental opportunity we have is to tailor vehicles to trip requirements and make them safe and compelling for their specific purposes. So this avoids lugging around extra weight, extra material, extra energy, extra power, extra space, extra capital, and extra cost when you just don't need to be dragging that around with you. If you're going to go 5 miles to a restaurant, let's say with your wife, maybe you use a 2-seat vehicle with a 75-mile range and a 30 horsepower motor. And if you take an occasional family weekend trip, maybe go up north, maybe your vehicle has 4 or 5 seats in it, some cargo space. Maybe it's a 400-mile range and 250 horsepower. What we're trying to avoid is that you use that occasional use vehicle for your frequent everyday trips. And I think the maturing and emerging innovation that we've been seeing here over the last decade makes this technically feasible and operationally viable. What I'm saying is nothing needs to be invented for this to happen. I want you to think about it the way you might think about your clothing. We dress for specific circumstances. Like tonight, I wore this collared shirt and a sport coat because I'm at a business meeting. If I was going to jog, I'd wear a jogging suit and running shoes. If I was going to ski, maybe a down jacket and ski pants. And if I had to go to a black tie event, maybe I would rent a tuxedo. We don't dress each day in clothes to handle all these purposes, just in case those purposes pop up. Our clothes are tailored to their purposes. They're not designed like Swiss Army knives to accommodate anything that could happen. But yet, this is how we think about our cars, like Swiss Army knives. I think automobility really presents an intriguing opportunity to get at these typical frequent trips. Their characteristics are listed here. And this is a two-seat, inline, autonomous electric vehicle. And this vehicle, I think, could accommodate most of the trips we make on an everyday basis, especially in cities and suburbs. It would go door to door. It would be the ultimate riding machine. What do I mean by that? Every time you get out of it, you feel better than when you got into it. Use this technology for compelling ride. Use it for great infotainment. Use it for smart parking. It would cost 75% less per ride or mile than conventional automobiles. I'm not making these numbers up. In my advising roles with many companies, I've modeled these kinds of systems, and those opportunities are real. It would be safe for riders, pedestrians, and bicyclists by keeping it out of harm's way with what I like to call virtual safety fencing. The technology exists to not let this car get in harm's way. It would weigh less than 2,000 pounds, have a 100-mile range, 500-pound maximum payload, 700-pound towing. And it could be personally owned or leased. It could be a robo-taxi, or it could be used for goods delivery. And there are several different ways to accommodate these occasional trips. Let's say you wanted to take a family trip. Mom and dad could be in the front vehicle. The kids could be in the following vehicle, or mom and daughter could be in the following vehicle. It would be like they're in your back seat, but you're virtually connected to them, not physically connected. Or if you wanted to go on a double date, a similar idea. Or if you had a lot of bags to take with you to the airport, if two of you are going to the airport. Or for these long trips, you could put a range extending module on it. Why carry around 200 kilowatt hour battery all the time when you can get by usually with maybe a 20 or 30 kilowatt hour battery? So why not take your power wall from Tesla off the wall and put some wheels on it and pull it with this and give yourself 200 or 300 miles more range. Or we could even rethink our interstate system. Imagine a flatbed platform where several of these can sit on the platform like a ferry, and then you can go with greater distance and higher speed enabled by these ferries. And for these special trips, maybe there's businesses called mobility hubs where you can go in and easily get access to a vehicle like one of the ones shown here. This really gives us a chance to have a much smaller EV footprint, the two-person pod compared to the pickup truck. This is 20 kilowatt hours versus 200 kilowatt hours. What are we doing with these big batteries? Think about it. We're taking this lithium out of the earth. Oh, we got a lithium shortage. We got to have lithium mines. Oh my gosh. And we're putting it in a parking lot. And it's sitting there in a parking lot. It's not creating value other than 5% of the time. And by putting the electric vehicle into the big vehicle, you're making that absurdity even more severe. These images, by the way, are from my friend Dan Sturgis. He allowed me to use them. So, how you see things really matters. A pessimist will see a glass half full. An optimist will see a pessimist will see a glass half empty. An optimist will see it half full. Engineers like me see the glass being twice as big as it needs to be. And I think that's how we have to think about these opportunities. And this one, I can't take you through all the arithmetic, but on the left, this side over here. Three lanes, major arterial. With the cars averaging 1.5 people in them with the headway based on human driving, which lets you get 2,000 vehicles per hour in those lanes. On the right, I've taken 2 of those lanes and turned it into 3 for the inline pods. I've tightened up the headway because they're autonomous. And then the 1 remaining lane for the regular cars, I've got tighter headways and higher occupancy. The left is 9,000 people per hour. The right is 42,500. And the only added roadway investment you did was striping. So this is a big, big opportunity compared to redoing our freeway system as we know it. So what's the elephant in the room? There's always an elephant in the room. I was talking about my wife, but we had one of those questions recently. She's 4 years younger than me. We really had just been avoiding this, but finally I said, you know, if anything ever happens to me, are you going to get remarried? Oh, no, I care for you too much. I said, yeah, but I'd be gone. You're still young, sort of. And she said, okay, I'll think about it. I said, if you get remarried, you're going to let this guy have my car. I got this Audi TT convertible. She says, oh, no, that's your pride and joy. I said, I'd be gone. It'd be in the garage. It just makes sense. She said, okay, I'll think about it. I said, what about my golf clubs? And she said, oh, no, he's left-handed. So there is an elephant in the room here on what I'm talking about, and I accept that, and that's okay if it's on your mind. But here's what has to be true for what I'm talking about to come true. It's not that ambitious of a list. First, 2-person inline vehicles must be safe, provide compelling experiences. I'm not talking about bouncing around in a cheap go-kart. I'm talking about something that if I arrive in it at my country club, Bluefield Hills Country Club, I'm the envy of the members. It's that kind of compelling experience. Cost less than alternatives and blend seamlessly into our lives. These other trips I want to take have to be really easy to take. Not a hassle with scheduling, not a hassle with giving my credit card, not a hassle with the car being dirty, but really easy to do. And the people must be free to choose how they travel. I'm not here to tell you you're going to have to ride in one of these. Hey, if you want a big, powerful vehicle and you want to pay way more per mile than you could with this alternative, and you want to go fast, you got to be held accountable for the public side effects of that. People who prefer to ride in tailored vehicles must be able to do so safely, but people who prefer to drive large, powerful, fast automobiles must be accountable for their public side effects. Think about it like secondhand smoking. Now, I'm old enough, my office mate, when I first started working at General Motors, was a smoker. And I just had to deal with it. Lo and behold, someone discovers that me breathing my office mate's cigarette smoke wasn't good for me, and the world got on with it. My office mate had a public side effect, me. And we started not letting smoking happen in public buildings, then in restaurants, then in bars. And you hardly see people smoking anymore. Think about this like secondhand physics. That's what we're talking about. The mass and power and speed of these big vehicles have an externality like secondhand smoke. And we have to find a way to make people accountable for it. I think it's gotten flipped totally around, where the big vehicle on the freeway feels like they have a God-given right to get on your tail and push you over when you're already going 80 in the left lane. We got to step up to that, and we can. I think it's inevitable. The BYD Seagull, $10,000 EV with God's Eye ADAS, what a name. Man, what kind of marketing is that? But this means these high-level ADAS systems on this $10,000 Chinese EV are going to be standard. Waymo has had their data assessed by a third party a couple of times, and generally the numbers are coming in that Waymo's 90% less likely to be involved in crashes, especially crashes that are severe enough where an airbag could deploy. And I connect those dots, and I think this is not a question of whether, it's simply a question of when. So let's tick off why I think it's so important that we get on with this. Improve safety, reduce cost, better riding experiences, repurpose the time I spend behind the steering wheel, increase roadway throughput, Door-to-door trips, really convenient. I mean, not having to park and walk. Wouldn't need my umbrella. Reduce parking. Major infrastructure investments can be avoided, and better physical access for all. The point I'm making here is the biggest risk is not realizing these benefits as soon as we safely can. And I recognize there's many, many players out here with a vested interest. Is this flashing up here too? My screen's flashing. That's right. There's many players up here with a vested interest that would like this not to happen. What if you're a car insurance company and someone said cars aren't going to crash? What if you're an oil company and someone says we can, get by with very little oil because we've transitioned to electric? What if you're a trial lawyer and you make a lot of money because you're representing people who are in crashes? So I think they're going to push back, but I think this value is so compelling that it's going to be inevitable and it's going to happen. But my story doesn't end there tonight, so please bear with me with just a little bit more. My wife and I have a godchild, and she was reading our godchild a bedtime story the other night, and Gracie said, "Auntie Cece, do all fairy tales start with once upon a time?" And my wife said, "No, most of them start with if I am elected." So I've lost my notes here. Oh, here we are, I'm sorry. So what's happened here? 1975 to 2025, digital technology came at us like a tsunami. The internet, laptops, cell phones, navigation, maps, online learning, telehealth, e-commerce, video conferencing, streaming, social networking, ride-hailing. All of this just came at us. Let's look at a couple of examples. These are my two daughters, Natalie and Hillary. Natalie's 37 and Hillary's 34. And in middle school, they both got their first cell phone. And in high school, they got their first car. And I asked them each separately when those moments happened, what would they give up first, their car or their cell phone? Without hesitation, they both said they'd give up their car before their cell phone. So for their generation, virtual access clearly was more important to them than the car. Now, they've created an online influencer business related to food. It's called The Pantry. Each week they suggest recipes, and one week my wife and I wanted to make a dish that called for tandoori seasoning, and we didn't have it. So I thought through two ways to get this tandoori seasoning. One was to jump in my car, drive to Johnny Pomodoro's, the market 3 miles away, park, walk in, hope they had it, looked around, found it, checked out, got back in my car and drove home. That would have been about 30 minutes, 6-mile round trip, and then the cost of the seasoning was $4.99. That would have been about $10 in 30 minutes. The other option was to go to Amazon Prime and have it brought to my porch for $5.61. It took me 5 minutes to find it, and I actually did that shopping when Johnny's was closed at night. So there is no amount of speed increase you could have given me to save as much time as not having to make this trip. And you might say, geez, Larry, how can you justify a truck coming to your door to drop off a couple ounces of seasoning? That truck is mass transit. That truck is public transportation. That truck represents 40 trips people would have made to the stores in their cars that are now being made in a much more cost-effective route. How else can they do it and make money at Amazon? One more example, video conferencing. I know the jury's still out on remote work. I happen to love it. I used to make 40 business trips before COVID a year. Now with roughly the same number of clients, I'm making about 10. Even if you can work from home 1 day a week, the impact on your personal flexibility and congestion is significant. So what is my point here? What am I trying to tell you? What I'm saying is what we do is being impacted by virtual access across the board. Remote work, e-commerce, search, online courses, food delivery, telehealth, online fitness, video conferencing, social networking, video game streaming, virtual vacations, online and mobile banking. All of those things on the right impact whether, where, when, and how we travel. And fewer trips means I save more time than faster trips. And more flexibility on when I can do things increases my access to other things more than faster trips. Why are we so obsessed with speed? Why did all of that technology from 1982 on translate into 175% more horsepower and 55% faster 0 to 60? If what the value proposition in a car is access, it's not speed. Our time use. In the past, many of the things you used to have to do had to occur at a specific time, a specific place. That's not the case anymore, and this flexibility is really, really liberating. And what about cities and other areas? Virtual access means the fundamental assumptions behind cities and suburbs and rural areas just no longer apply. Throughout the history of civilization, people and businesses located in cities, why? They wanted to access markets and workers and goods and jobs and knowledge and innovation. You don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to live in the city or work in the city to be able to do that. This really has significant implications for future public policy. Green states, blue states, think about, red states, blue states, think about red cities, blue cities, and where the political bases are for the different parties. The geopolitical dynamics here are going to be really, really impressive. And we really love access. Americans have 275 million cars, 250 million personal computers, and 310 million smartphones. And our future access is also going to have virtual valets or butlers that will run errands for us and help us choreograph our lives at significantly lower cost. So where's the future of living headed? I think if you look at these maturing and emerging technologies, robots and sensors and smartphones and smart glasses, artificial intelligence, actually I think natural stupidity beats artificial intelligence, but we can talk about that later. Big data, holography, all of this stuff is coming together to give us better virtual experiences. All of this is going to get better. It's going to give us artificial intelligence that not only can hear, see, speak, it can infer and advise. That's a new kind of access. Enhanced automobility, and it'll be blended nicely into our lives. So the future of access is really a combination of tailored physical access and enhanced virtual access. That's where I see the world headed. And because buying a car is really akin to buying access, I think the biggest competitive threat for auto companies aren't other auto companies. It's what this is going to do to how we live our lives and how we access, and what this is going to do to travel and the assumptions behind what we need in terms of cars. The auto industry has to reimagine how electric vehicles fit within this broad access system. And gaining access to something you need or desire without having to travel really, really has significant implications. And this is going to these changes are going to influence the use and design of our cars. So think about this. This is a winning strategy. I sat down and said, what did I have on my desk in 1980 to do what my iPhone does today? Televisions and radios and phones and atlases and cameras and compasses and you name it. Now, as an engineer, think about designing and engineering every one of those products on the left, tooling them, validating the production system, making the capacity investment, having the service parts. And all of those functions that are being performed on the left can be performed on the iPhone. Unbelievable. Obviously, Apple focused on design innovation, focused on the total customer experience. And what if our electric vehicles follow the same path that the iPhone did? What if that's where we end up? I find that to be an extremely, extremely exciting opportunity in terms of where it could head. But we also have to think about what that would mean in terms of jobs and in terms of materials and in terms of affordability. The Illinois Institute of Technology, they have a design institute there. They were asked by Fortune magazine to assess the best 100 designs of modern time. They had done this once in 1959, and they updated it to 2022. And those with the star on the list are virtual access designs. That was not the case in 1959. There are a lot of cars on the list in 59. Design innovation is value adding, really turning into value driving. Objects and turning into experiences, focusing on how things work, not just how they look, and the entire ecosystem, not just the products. It's this design innovation that unlocks the value for new technology. And Adam, Alan, I'm hammering on this. I'm hammering on this a bit because I really hope your EV Center has a chance to look at not just the things on the left, but the things on the right, the entire ecosystem and the experiences. I really think there's a compelling opportunity to make smaller and safer cool. Everything in this picture is in your pocket. Okay, so why should we continue to have our cars the way they are? We can create gotta-have experiences with the EVs tailored to trip requirements, seamless experiences blended into our lives, and technology value that's unlocked with design. We've got to return the auto industry to its fashion roots. We have to make these EVs something we wear, not just something we drive. You know, I picked on my wife a bit, and I talked about inevitability a bit, but she's always been on me about getting an overcoat. I was, an officer at GM, and we'd go to these events. I didn't have an overcoat. She says, come on, you got to have a good overcoat. You got to dress accordingly. I said, nah. One day we were at Costco, and there was a rack of cashmere overcoats from Macedonia for $50. I said, look, I can get an overcoat now. You need an overcoat from Saks. You got to dress the part. I said, no, this is great. So I buy this Costco overcoat. 2 nights later, we have a black tie event at the Townsend Hotel in Birmingham. I'm checking my coat, and the coat check woman said, wow, this is a really nice coat. Where'd you get it? And I go, Saks. And she said, Saks sells Kirkland? So fashion's important. It really is. And getting in front of the inevitability is even more important. So that's my first recommendation. This is my gift to you. You can do with it what you want to do. You always gave me advice. I took some of it too. Okay, get in front of the inevitable. Replace big vehicles with big ideas. I think this is a great opportunity. Envision EVs based on the future of living and the future of access, not just based on cars as we've always known it. Recognize that the best thing to scale the solutions we need to the challenges we face, and by the way, we face a lot of challenges here beyond just climate change, is the market. Electric vehicles are just a better way to do a car in so many ways. And so we don't need to keep wrapping them in the climate change issue and justifying them based on that. Justify them as an engineer would, half as many parts, way fewer moving parts, as a designer would, greater experiences. That's what we have to do. Use idealized design, a simple concept. Start by looking at the end and work backwards to what you have to do today. And then consider Ann Arbor as a living, learning laboratory. It's really kind of neat. Ann Arbor is like an island surrounded by these freeways, and there's only 20 ways to get into this island, over the freeway or under the freeway. So you could have that entire inside island with these inline 2-person pods, and you could have the interfaces to these faster, bigger modes outside the island. And then stimulate innovation with student competitions. You do a great job of that already. So finally, I'm really optimistic about the future. I don't think anything needs to be invented to do what I'm talking about here. I think there's plenty of resources to pull it off, and I think it's going to give us compelling access for everyone. It's only those people on the cutting edge of knowledge, the people at places like University of Michigan, who really know what's possible. You've got to have a seat at the table with the people who know what's possible to make the right business decisions going forward. That's why this center is so important. You're uniquely positioned to embrace what is already viable and what will be proven soon. So I ask a question tonight, now what? And my answer is simple. Just do it. Do what engineers do. We make what's possible real. And what I talked about tonight is possible. I used Prince's Little Red Corvette as my walk-up music. It turns out Prince was driving around in his Corvette on a country road one day, kind of lost control and he went in a ditch and got stuck. Couldn't get his car out. Along comes Farmer Jones with a wagon being pulled by an old horse named Buddy. Prince waves him down and said, "Hey, do you think you can get my little red Corvette out of this ditch?" And he said, "Yeah." So he hitches Buddy up to the Corvette. He goes, "Pull, Ginger, pull." And nothing happens. "Pull, Coco, pull." Nothing happens. "Pull, Red, pull." Nothing happens. And he goes, "Pull, Buddy, pull." And Buddy pulls the Corvette out of the ditch. And Prince goes, "God, thanks. But why'd you call him all those other names?" He said, "Well, Buddy's really old and he can't see. And if he thought if he was pulling all by himself, he wouldn't even try." Okay? I'm really old. I can't hear. I'm not pulling alone. We've got your center, your staff, and all of these great students. We just got to get them pulling on the right stuff. Thank you very much.
I'm going to take the liberty of the first question, and I'll probably need to repeat. This is the first time, I think that's you,
Oh, I'm sorry.
where you've questioned the inevitability of urbanization and the growth of the megacities. Can you expand on that? Because people have been assuming that's the future.
Yeah. Well, today, when people get asked where they live in the United States, 25% say city, 25% say rural area, and 50% say suburbs. And so a lot of transportation issues tend to get framed through the lens of urban transportation. It's sort of like, why do people rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Why urban? That's where the congestion is. But suburban lifestyle is preferred by 50% of Americans. Some planners would say that's because they're forced to own a car, they're forced to live outside the city, they're forced to commute. But with the virtual access that I laid out, Alan, I think we've got a chance to really question whether or not you have to live in the city in order to get the access benefits of the city. So yeah, I was asked to participate in a UN sustainability meeting, and this was the theme that I wanted to really bring home. I think the demographers are going to be wrong, is what I believe.
Yeah. We'll take some questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Larry. One of my questions is, Alan Kay at Xerox PARC had said that a characteristic of all of the inventions in computing that Xerox PARC did, he said great engineers and scientists exist in every generation, but great funders of those projects do not. And one of the things I'm curious about is, what are some ways all of us can kind of sell this vision to the people that will sponsor these types of projects?
Yeah. That's why I think this living learning laboratory is so important. You've got a lot of pieces here already. You've got M-City, for example, and you do have a city that understands it's got a big university in it. And I think if you build it, they will come. We've got to do first digital twins. If I was doing my dissertation here at University of Michigan right now in this general field, I would do a digital twin of Ann Arbor within that freeway island, and I would model what could be possible, do the sensitivity analyses, and then use the augmented reality tools and other things to make it come alive, make it visual. That's not quite a prototype, but it's a far more cost-effective way to help people see what's possible. So that's what I would do. You've got to make it understandable. And oftentimes the words we use in this field just go over their heads. You've got to make it understandable with images, in my opinion.
Hi, Larry. Thank you so much for coming tonight and talking about all this. My name is Jeffrey Huang. I work with a nonprofit, Michigan Clean Cities and Next Energy. We support cleaner energy, cleaner fuel, cleaner transportation, just like you're talking about. I found myself nodding along, really agreeing at the beginning of your talk. And I think the vision that you laid out tonight for more sustainable and more efficient transportation is something that a lot of folks in the space that I think a lot of us work in is something that we see as like the future goal. I think the question is, just like you're pointing out, the innovation isn't really needed for that kind of vision yet. It's really the policy and pushing folks on that. What's your strategy? What tactics should folks be using to really pitch this and actually get this moving to the just do it point? Because I think that's the challenge.
I made a couple of jokes about the politicians and chaos, but it's a very, very serious question because, I graduated with my undergraduate degree in 73. I came here to Michigan in 73, and I got my master's in public policy. I went from mechanical engineering to public policy. And then I regained my senses and went back into engineering for my doctorate. But I think about those times in the late 60s and early 70s, and in the 1970s, people really were concerned about air pollution and safety and fuel economy, and they created regulations to solve those problems. And we wake up here today with the cars being so much heavier and so much more powerful. So you have got to get behind the root cause of what drove that. I think what's driving it is who controls the wealth of the world. And I think there are a lot of forces behind hydrocarbon-based energy that said, we want to keep this in play. Think about the companies who lose big if cars don't crash, or who lose big if cars have a third as much material in them as they have in the past, or 40% the amount of labor content. So I love your question because I think this is as much a political public policy challenge as it is a technical challenge. And I take you back to, you got to build it here. If we can't get it done at a place like University of Michigan, I don't know where you're going to get it done.
Yes, Steve.
Larry, thank you for your time in the presentation. I work in the infrastructure side of the business, and I wanted to get your thoughts on the chicken or the egg when it comes to trying to get vehicles out in the market, but the infrastructure is not there to support the grid. That's why the chargers aren't there as well. And what are your thoughts on even alternative fuels and different methods of trying to power these vehicles? Because it does take a lot of power.
Yeah, well, when you ask the question, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, I think you need a rooster in that equation. And someone's going to have to step up and really set the example. I'm really concerned that that's going to happen outside the United States and not inside the United States. The progress China's made on electric vehicles. I mean, Alan and I worked together in that time frame when GM was really planting its flag in China. Geez, you made a lot of trips to China back then, and to India for that matter. But we were looking at that, and we were the pavilion of choice at the Shanghai Road Expo in 2010, and we showcased this two-seat vehicle there. And now I look at that BYD Seagull, that's an astronomical accomplishment. And I don't think it's smoke and mirrors. So I think China has all the reasons to want to get on with the kind of vision I laid out here, because when we modeled Shanghai at the time, if they continued to grow the number of cars in Shanghai that had happened the previous 10 years, all of the land would be covered with cars, including sidewalks. So that's not going to happen. So they need these alternatives. So from an infrastructure standpoint, the chicken and egg issue is because we're trying to do it with subsystems. We've got to take on the whole system, and we've got to demonstrate that. Digital twins is a good way to get started. I think you could organize a research program and research projects around a digital twin. And I know it's not completely real, but boy, get it as close to being real as you can. And then ask, what do I really need infrastructure-wise? Because I think the charger issue isn't nearly as big if you're moving around with vehicles with 20 kilowatt-hour batteries as it is with 200. Oh, sorry.
There we go. You mentioned, I think, in your comments that the car choices of today are kind of led by those with more wealth. And it reminds me that I think as much as 75% of us are not in the new car market, maybe 2/3 of us buy used vehicles. So that really does, by definition, suggest that 25 to 30 something percent of the people are making the new car choices that the rest of us have to live with. So I'm kind of curious about your thoughts about that and how that affects what we're talking about here tonight. And then
Really?
also,
Yes.
I don't think you talked that much about ownership, but I think, some people have surmised that maybe we get away from car ownership, and that seems pretty difficult to imagine. I think still the cultural desire to have your own car in your own driveway is pretty compelling. But anyway, any additional thoughts about that would be
Yeah,
welcome.
those 2 points go hand in hand. Your choices in the used car market are totally dependent on what the new car market has been building. And what's been going into the new car market are mid-size SUVs and above. I think GM's smallest car today is a Chevy Trax crossover SUV. It's $28,000, and it really would be what I would call a compact type SUV, maybe a little bit bigger than that. So that used car fleet has gotten really, really big too, and pricey. So there is a huge interdependence. Alan mentioned that I'm an advisor to a real estate development company in Florida. We're building an all-new town called Babcock Ranch. I'm on their board as well as a technology advisor. My assignment from the founder of this company is, Larry, find a way for our residents to live with one car, not 2 or 3. We want them to be able to move around in this community. It's about 30 square miles. And golf cart-like vehicles. We will have the shopping stores there. We'll have everything they need. And if they need to go outside that area, make it really easy for them to get an enterprise car rental or a Zip car or an Uber or some other mode, because they don't need to go outside that often. So I think you're onto something really important. And by the way, if you really begin to impact the need for a second car, what happens to the used car market? It tanks. What happens to the new car market if the used car market tanks? It tanks. So these are really, really big issues for the economy, but you're onto something in your question. It's an important question.
Let's give Larry another round of applause. And he mentioned fashion, so we're making sure he's advertising the EV Center.
Thank you very much.
The other thing, I would also give a message to the faculty here. Again, I've had Larry come and talk at my class every year, so the departing seniors get to hear this. But unfortunately, we had to send our undergraduates home when we opened the bar. So I would hope the various faculty in here, and Larry, I assume you'd be okay with us sharing the slides so you can get this message across. I think just one more time. So see you bright and early tomorrow at 8. We'll have a light breakfast and a pretty full program that starts at 8:30.